Why is it that no one talks about the elephant in our nation's living room? The elephant in our living room is war and military spending. Together, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have cost the nation more than 6,000 military lives and $1.5 trillion. But according to Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz, when care for wounded veterans, replacement of military gear, interest on the debt created by paying for the wars on the national credit card, and other residual future costs are factored in, the real cost will be between $5 and $6 trillion. The fiscal crisis affecting 46 of 50 states that are all running deficits has caused teachers to be laid off, fire stations closed, social programs slashed, infrastructure left degraded and unrepaired, and a host of other pressing needs going unmet. Together, the total of all the states' deficits in 2012 will be $122 billion. It costs $1 to $1.25 million per year for each soldier, sailor, or Marine we send to Afghanistan. The war budget for Afghanistan this year is $122 billion. Add in the cost of Iraq, and the total is $169.4 billion. And let's not forget, there was the $7 million per day we were spending in Libya for yet another undeclared war. Altogether enough to cover all of the state's deficits with funds left over to restore the social safety net and meet other essential social needs. Since 9/11, our country's national security expenses have cost us $7.6 trillion. Of that, $1.36 trillion is the cost of the two wars, $230 billion for nuclear arms, $5.6 trillion for the Pentagon's core budget, and $472 billion for Homeland Security. Together, this has cost an astounding $5,372 per second. For what Californians have paid for the Afghan war over those 10 years, we could have paid for 3.5 years of salary and benefits for every elementary school teacher in the state. What we paid for the Iraq war would cover the cost of public disaster funds dispersed by FEMA for 12 years. And the Afghan war would be worth 7 years of Pell Grant funding. The federal budget is divided between mandatory and discretionary spending. Mandatory expenditures are dictated by law and cover such things as Social Security, Medicare, and interest on the federal debt. Unlike discretionary spending, Congress does not vote annually on these appropriations. This year, we'll spend 59 cents of every discretionary tax dollar on the military, more than for all of the rest of the government combined. Since the year 2000, national security discretionary spending has risen at a rate of 96%, or 2.5 times the rate of increase in non-security discretionary spending. There's a whole lot of talk about the debt and budget deficits. The deficit hawks, however, never reveal why we have such a large and growing deficit. Take away what we spent on illegal wars, the billions that Bush and company gave away to their rich friends in tax cuts, the bailout for banks and wealthy investors, and the recession created by those same banks, brokers, and speculators, and the deficit evaporates. Working people did not cause any of these things to happen and didn't benefit from the giveaways. They shouldn't have to pay so that the economic elite can continue to maintain their opulent lifestyle and pursue their greedy objectives at our expense. Here's another way to look at this issue. 37% of the deficits between 2002 and 2011 is attributable to military spending, principally the wars. 46% is a result of the Bush-era tax cuts for the wealthy. Together, these two sources account for 83% of the deficit. A substantial part of the base military budget, which doesn't include the wars, is the cost of the 1,000 or more military bases the U.S. maintains around the world. Together, more than 200,000 military personnel are stationed at these bases at an annual cost of approximately $250 billion. The U.S. is the only nation in the world to maintain such a global network of permanent foreign military bases. We still station troops in Germany, Japan, France, and England 66 years after the end of the Second World War. Among the installations considered critical to our national security are a ski center in the Bavarian Alps, resorts in Seoul and Tokyo, and 234 golf courses the Pentagon runs worldwide. When you look at global military spending, the U.S. spends 43%, or nearly as much as all of the rest of the world combined, more than our Cold War adversaries, China and Russia, more than all our NATO allies. By comparison, the total military spending of all of the axis of evil countries President Bush used to rail against comes to just 1% of the global total. We could cut military spending in half and still have the largest military budget in the world. A lot of people depend on the military for a living, and most of those are not in uniform. We're told that military spending is a source of good jobs. But while almost all government spending is a source of jobs, not all government spending has the same economic impact. For every $1 billion spent on the military, 11,600 jobs are created. But the same $1 billion spent on tax cuts that fuel consumer spending creates 14,800 jobs. And on clean energy programs, 17,100 jobs. On health care, 19,600 jobs. And on education, 29,100 jobs, or 2.5 times as many jobs as military spending creates. This cartoon pretty accurately describes our present crisis. The Congress treats Wall Street financial interests as too big to fail and too big to tax, and the military-industrial complex as sacrosanct. Together, they are our sacred cows. All of the budget cuts, therefore, come from already starved social programs. 29 states have cut funding for older and disabled people. 34 states have cut public education. 44 states have cut the state workforce. 31 states have cut public health. It's pretty clear. Our country suffers from a military-industrial complex. The deficit hawks talk a lot about the runaway cost of entitlements. By this, they usually mean Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other social safety net programs. The first thing to note is that we pay for the Social Security and Medicare through payroll taxes. If by entitlement they mean we're entitled to get what we pay for, what's wrong with that? But they also never talk about corporate subsidies, tax breaks, and tax loopholes to which the rich believe they are entitled. And unlike us, they don't pay for those. We do. The question we must answer is whether our economic and political system should continue to be run for the benefit of the 1% or for the benefit of the rest of us, the 99%. Our political system has been hijacked by corporations and rich investors. What happened to government of, by, and for the people?